All right. Welcome, everybody. We'll give everyone a couple minutes to join here. Feel free to drop in the chat where you're calling in from and a podcast that you're listening to right now. We got Italy, Massachusetts. What's the furthest? Brussels.
Is the big picture behind the scenes of movie making?
It's not really behind the scenes. It's just like movie talk. I like movies.
Yeah.
That Argentina. We'll start in just a couple minutes. Welcome, everybody. I love the beginning of these.
I mean, it's like it's kind of quiet and no one's saying anything. It's just a little awkward.
Yeah. Maybe 100 people just watching us.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'll get pull this up so everyone knows they're in the right place. A couple more minutes. How's Illinois right now, Roman?
It's not bad. I mean, like today it's like 90, and the rest of the week is going to be relatively mild. Last week though, it was like mid 90s and the humidity was like 70%, and so you'd step outside and just be completely drenched in a couple minutes. It was miserable.
It's hot. It's hot in the Bay Area as well right now.
Yeah. It's probably 20 degrees hotter over by Yukon, right? Than
yeah, it's supposed to be like 90s today. So
nice. Okay. All right. I think we're good to kick this off. We have some introductions and whatnot to go through, so I'm sure we'll have more folks as we get to the meat of this. But welcome everybody to CMAI's webinar, AI-powered outbound, why, how, and when to start. This is a really hot topic. There's a lot of chatter about this. So we wanted to help out and get two really great experts in this space to talk through it. Do feel free to ask questions in the chat. We will get to them as we can. There's a great opportunity to pick their brains. So we want to make sure that everyone is getting what they want out of this. Quickly on CMAI, CMAI is an AI growth engine that gives sales and marketing teams everything they need to scale their go-to-market with AI. So from unifying all of their customer data, cutting audiences across any data point, personalization at scale, and activation across the channels you already use and love. The founding team helped build the go-to-market data stack during Okta's hypergrowth, and we've essentially productized that stack into one easy, non-technical tool. So that's us. Let's get to the part that everyone is here for. Here's our agenda. We'll start with just an introduction of our great panelists. Then we'll talk about what is AI outbound, what is AI growth, and why does it matter? Then we'll cover the prerequisites, the things that you need to do first before you can apply it. What can you be doing now to implement AI growth in the future? And then we'll get into the weeds and talk about how to implement it. Where do you apply it? How do you apply it? What kind of tools do you use? And then that'll probably bring us to the end here. So let's start with introductions. My name is Mikhail. I go by Mick. I'm one of the co-founders of SeamAI. My background was at Okta. I worked there for about 5 years in their sales org. Really, the origin of Seam has to do with our experience there and how much data we had and how good Okta was at using that data to grow. But they invested a lot in it, and we wanted to make that more accessible. So I'm Mick. I'm joined by Roman Kapitko. He's the director of growth at Red Panda, a Series C startup focused on real-time data streaming. With over a decade of experience in scaling startups, he specializes in building and scaling demand gen functions with a particular focus on outbound go-to-market and account-based marketing. So welcome, Roman. Conrad, joining us from Rippling. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Conrad.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. And it's great to see folks joining all around the world. It looks like I just saw someone from Brazil. But my name is Conrad. I have been in marketing ops for almost 10 years now, almost predominantly all B2B SaaS companies. I started early days at Okta and then moved on to a sales forecasting software called Clary. And then now at Rippling, which is an all-in-one HR platform. And I've been at Rippling for about 1.5 years thus far. And I'm super excited to talk to you all about AI and how to embed it within your business. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So let's start with what is this and why does it matter? So to start, how do you define AI-powered growth? And I think, again, there's a lot of information out there. Is this something that sends emails for you? Is it, replacing SDRs? Is it replacing salespeople or marketers? Let's talk a little bit about what this is and how you define it. So I don't know who wants to kick this off, Roman or Conrad. Dealer's choice.
Go for it, Roman.
I can get started on this one. So I really define AI-powered growth as just being able to scale your current growth motions. I mean, that sounds simple, but it's really all-encompassing. It's really all about just being able to infuse AI in order to speed up your existing processes, eliminate labor or decision making, and just making the entire process move much faster than it normally would. I mean, you really have to think about it as touching every part of the growth motion, and that's from account personalization to targeting to account prioritization and customer experience. I mean, there are a ton of areas to where AI can make a significant difference. It can add in additional context, or just to be able to speed up that decision making and growth process.
Right. I think that's great. So I think it's, to reiterate that, it's adding AI to your existing processes to supercharge them, essentially. So it's potentially agnostic to the channel. You're probably running ads, you're sending emails. AI could be layered across all those, it sounds like. Conrad, what do you think?
I would say on top of just like the scale and the creativity that AI can give your business, it's also just a level of efficiency. Tasks and sort of elementary things that normally would take a decent amount of time to execute can now just be mostly automated. The strategy and the decision-making is still left to the individual, and AI today is mostly a human-led growth tactic, right? But at the end of the day, I do think it can provide you a ton of efficiency to layer on more strategic decision making, and we'll get a little bit of that today. But I would just say on top of just not only the ability to scale, but how do we become more efficient?
Yeah, great. We talk a lot about this at Seam, and I think to add one more perspective, we really think about it as a system that takes lead generating actions across multiple channels based on a rich data set. So that could be end-to-end automation in certain areas. There might be a human in the loop in other areas, but it's really the system that's being applied to your existing motions, right? It's not going to invent a new pipe gen kind of channel for you. It's going to maximize what you're doing and make it more efficient. We talked a little bit about this. Efficiency is a big part, but why should teams apply AI to their growth strategy? Is this the future? Is it a trend? What do we think?
Yeah, I think I can take the first stab at this one. I think we can actually have a pretty significant impact today. Now, what's to say that's going to be the same impact in the future? But as of today, I do believe there's some significant gains that companies can get from it. I'll give you a problem statement that sort of Rippling experience. So Rippling is a 3,000 person, still private, high growth startup. And we have shifted a lot of our go-to-market motion from being solely inbound to significant outbound headcount. And so what we've done is we've hired several hundred SDRs, outbound SDRs, to go after a pretty significant TAM for the company. And one of the things that we found after about 6 months of that program being launched was that it was really difficult to try and get the level of personalization of email at scale that we wanted to achieve. And so one of the why I'm answering the question of why should teams apply AI to the growth strategy is we attempted to have everyone hire all these people, get them to personalize emails and try and increase conversion of those emails. And what we found is that we could actually layer on AI to become a helper of how to personalize those emails for the outbound SDR engine. And we have significant conversion impact on that decision. And so I would say like the why behind it really is like, what gains or what impact can you have on your business to solve some sort of potentially rudimentary problem at scale? Yeah.
Love it. Roman, any thoughts there?
I mean, I definitely agree with all that, and I mean, for any company, there are a ton of obvious benefits. I mean, they can be greater scale for processes. I mean, the ability to speed up and launch new campaigns at scale, data and analytics and so forth. I mean, to me, the one that speaks to me the most is the ability to do more with less. I mean, teams right now are under significant pressure to deliver more results, do more activities, and be much more efficient. And AI, unlike a ton of other tools that came before it, is pretty versatile, and it can be applied in a number of ways in order to speed up all of these manual processes. And so the ability to remove a lot of tedious work and to streamline decision making is incredibly tempting and appealing, and especially if you are on a smaller marketing team, that efficiency per employee is super key, I find.
Definitely. Yeah. So efficiency, I think personalization at scale is something that we're both all talking about. And it's just volume, right? Like you can up volume with AI and not reduce quality, which is obviously going to help your growth strategy. Let's talk a little bit about AI generally. What is it good at right now, and what is hype? Like, how should people think about it? It's not magic, even though it sometimes feels like it. But if we're gonna think about tactically what AI is good at, how would we answer that?
Yeah, I can take a first stab at this one. I mean, so there's definitely a ton of hype that's happening in the AI market. And I mean, especially as it applies to go-to-market. I mean, there are new tools every day that are entering the market and are claiming to be able to automatically generate marketing campaigns, create ad visuals and copy, and basically reduce marketing to one person managing a bunch of different AI tools. I mean, that's definitely the promise that they're making, but in reality, it's so far from the truth that it's not really worth taking seriously at this point. I mean, if you demo any of these tools, the results can be pretty underwhelming, and in general, the quality of that output is mediocre at best. And so it's not really going to replace your SDR or marketing team. I mean, in my opinion, at the moment, AI is pretty bad at making big decisions or doing complicated tasks that require a ton of context. So if you are feeding it a ton of information and asking it to make a bunch of decisions off of it, it's going to make those decisions in strange ways, and the output is going to be pretty low quality. It is pretty good at making a lot of small decisions, and if you tie those small decisions together, then you are able to get a decent output. And so even if you are not replacing your marketing team, maybe at this point the marketing team can generate a campaign or its assets in half the time, or the ADR team can be much more efficient and targeted in its personalization. And it's also, if you have it make a ton of small decisions, it means that the risk of each decision being incorrect is pretty small.
Right. Totally. Reduce the surface area of potential mistakes. So small decisions, link them together.
Yeah.
I think that's right. So don't replace your whole SDR team with AI SDRs right now. All right, Connor, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'll be quick on this one. I think at a more tactical level, like I think AI today is really good with like natural language. If you want to feed it, say, raw text or things like that, and ask it to do segmentation or bucketing, or like AI is as good as you want to train it and prompt it. And so if your prompting and your training is really good, I think it can be pretty effective with, say, natural language. We're doing a lot of things with internal LLMs that we're building for detecting, positive or negative email replies and, doing things like that. But I do agree with Roman, the fact that I think it's really good today at asking it to do one thing, and it can do that one thing effective. But if you're trying to string along a variety of processes or automation or things like that to execute some grander process, I do think you're going to find some issues with it. But I think from a tactical level, that's what I would say.
I think a good example that people can think about is when you use ChatGPT. It's like if you ask it a bunch of small prompts and kind of lead it to water, it's going to do a lot better than throwing a paragraph in there and saying, what's the output, right? It's more effective by linking these things together. I think one more point that we've seen is that AI is really good at doing work with data, right? So there's a lot of stuff that used to require, an analyst or a data engineer, and AI is good at pulling lists. It's good at connecting different data sources. It's good at analyzing data. And so it's reducing the barrier for business teams or non-technical teams to do stuff with their data more effectively. And there's a lot of tools out there that we've seen that where it's like, hey, text to SQL, for example, is a use case that AI can be really, really good at. Cool. All right. So now we set the stage. Let's talk about prerequisites. Starting with data. Like we've talked to a bunch of companies. We hear the response, garbage in, garbage out all the time. We've talked to a bunch of companies that have tried something with AI and said, the outputs kind of sucked. And AI is as good as the data has access to. So how should folks be thinking about getting their data ready so that they can apply AI in an effective way? Connor, do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, I'll start with this one. I think like the only way this can really work effectively is if you structure and centralize your data into a single repository. I think if you have data in your go-to-market tech stack that lives within those tools itself, you're going to struggle to apply AI to it. But if you're taking the approach that sort of we are doing, which is let's create a single unified data repository in our warehouse that structures all data from all of your different platforms, signals, people, accounts, and all those things together, you then have a really good foundation of data to actually action it and apply AI processes and unique things to it, and that allows you to be much more effective with it. But I do think that laying that foundation of data and structuring it, normalizing and enriching it, getting it to a really good place is definitely a prerequisite of applying any AI functionality to it. Yeah.
So just quick follow up before we go to you, Roman. So where do you centralize your data? Is the CRM good enough? Like, data warehouse like the right way to go? I know that's like not always a go-to-market type tool, but talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely don't centralize all of your data in your CRM, because your CRM should be left specifically for the things that a sales or marketing function needs to run on, right? And so we do everything is centralized in Snowflake in our data warehouse. We have a single database that we ETL all of these data pipelines into. We have a raw data layer, and then below that we have a structured data layer. And on that structured data layer, we can apply business logic to it or other things to it. And that's really where the introduction to like AI or reverse ETL processes or, big complex automations pull data from, and allows us to do all of this like downstream automation and gathering of data before we want to go sync it to any downstream system, i.e. your CRM or say like an email platform or something like that. And so I think if you're a smaller company, you might struggle to find the internal resources to accomplish this. We do have a lot of data engineers and folks that have helped construct this sort of foundation. But I do think there are a lot of new tooling coming out that allows you to store and structured data in essentially a warehouse way more effectively. That doesn't require obviously like human beings to manage it. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Roman, anything to add?
Yeah. I mean, coming out of a smaller company, the data aspect of this is pretty key. I mean, without a centralized way in order to store, process, and transform our data, it would be essentially impossible to achieve any kind of scale or consistency in our AI output. And honestly, CRMs aren't really designed for this amount of data, and you're going to be seriously limited in what you can do if you are relying on a CRM to do all of the heavy lifting for you. And so you essentially need a centralized data warehouse kind of solution like Seam that can kind of gather all this information, store it, process it, and transform it. And there is a part of this I really want to emphasize, and that is that the quality of the data is super important here. AI is not going to catch any data errors for you, and it's not actually intelligent in the way that it appears, and so it's going to take everything incredibly literally. And so it's important that all of your data is properly cleaned, formatted, and annotated in a way that makes sense to the AI, and so that it has some kind of context around, like what the data means and how to use it. I mean, for each organization, it's going to look very different, but it all kind of depends on the amount of resources you have internally.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, I think about like data is context for AI, right? And if AI doesn't have all the context, it's not going to write an email that has all the context, right? So if you think about all the different places an SDR might look, and again, we're going back to this SDR example, but if you think about all the different UIs that an SDR might look at when they draft a really, really great email, if AI doesn't have access to all those different data sets, like it's not going to be able to write the same email, right? So I think centralizing that's really, really important. Now let's talk a little bit about like maturity of your go-to-market motion. one of the benefits of AI is this personalization at scale, or targeting at scale. How do you guys think about like segmenting the people you have, or how mature should your motion be? Do you different messaging? Is the AI going to do that for you? How do you think about that? Whoever wants to take this one.
Sure, I can take this one first. I mean, so this is an area that's really understated when it comes to any kind of AI-based strategy. You really can't do this if you don't have some kind of maturity around your ICP, your ideal personas, and with a deep understanding of what kind of messaging works for each kind of person or account that you're going after. I mean, the AI is not going to do the hard part for you just because it can't figure it out on its own. It needs to have very clear directions and processes on what it should do in each instance. It needs to have context, and it needs to have a step-by-step process in order to take all that information, give it various levels of importance, and then to understand what action needs to happen next. And so you kind of can't do outbound without having that kind of process. And it kind of leads to the conclusion that if you are not doing any kind of outbound at the moment, you shouldn't try to start by scaling with an AI solution.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I think that's great. Conrad, I know you do a lot of automation at Rippling. Like, maybe talk a little bit about how you apply different segments, personas, messaging.
Yeah. So at Rippling, for these that aren't aware, we're a heavy multi-product platform. We have a lot of different products. We have a pretty significant TAM. We sell to a lot of different industries, a lot of different segments. So our ICP is pretty broad. And so what we have internally is, I'll talk a little bit about it later, but we have a 250 row audience matrix that defines our automated email programs for the company. And basically this is cut by persona, industry, how long somebody's been in their job, like all these variations of things and signals that we would care to target. And this was a significant exercise that took, several humans to go and execute and build on, to build out this matrix. And what we have now done, which I'll talk to you a little later, is like we've now applied some machine learning sort of principles and things to this audience matrix to see like, hey, how would it cut our audiences? Like, how would it look at performance and know what's working and what's not working, and redefine the way we go at our TAM. But the only way this is possible is going back to that thing about prompting the right stuff to these models. Is basically we need to make sure we know exactly, what industries, what personas, what's targeting, what's our messaging, what's our product, all of those things baked out, and so that it's really effective. Or otherwise, it just wouldn't be. Might be simpler for other companies that are sort of single product platforms, but at scale, it can be a little bit difficult to execute.
A follow-up question on that is, for companies that are maybe still figuring out their ICP and their messaging, and maybe they're on the journey towards product market fit, is AI a decent pathway to testing and iterating quickly? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It allows more creativity, so we can actually like target audiences a little bit separately. And it again, going back to that, like what it can do is it's really good at bucketing data. You talked about data as the context, and if we give it all of the right data, it's really good at segmenting. And so what otherwise would require a human to think, I need to segment it this way, not based on potentially like a lot of internal analysis and things, if the person is doing their job effectively, right? But if that person is not doing their job effectively, the AI will win. And when it comes to segmentation, because it's going to look at other signals and performance metrics to determine what is the most valuable thing. Mm-hmm. And so I do think in that category, it can be pretty effective.
Yeah. And I think the volume can get you meaningful data and results faster, right?
Yeah.
Cool. question for you, Conrad. Were your teams doing outbound before AI, or did you use AI to scale? Because I do think Rippling's an interesting example, because you had, call it, programmatic outbound implemented, I think, kind of before the rise of AI, right? You built out some really impressive stuff. Like, what did it look like before, and how did you apply AI to improve it?
Yeah, the transition. So we definitely had programmatic outbound built before any AI or any sort of technologies were layered on top like this, and it was effective. But what we found is, like, as most of you have probably seen, the traditional hire a ton of SDRs and grow at all costs playbook is slowly starting to change as the world scales, especially as technology advances. And so what we realized is that the business, roughly, for a lot of the key sort of input metrics in the SDR business was relatively flat. And the question is like, why would it be flat? We have a significant TAM, we have a massive audience to go after. And the answer is because the traditional playbook isn't as effective as it used to be. And so we need to pivot, we need to change our strategy. And one of the key strategies and decisions we made, which was, hey, how do we layer on AI to help make our SDRs as productive and scaled and / effective as possible? And that's kind of what we've seen from the short-term impact of us doing these things. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. All right. Last question on this slide. What skill sets and personnel do you think you need to, like, really do this well? And I think even outside of, roles that maybe don't fall under go-to-market, like, how does the role of marketing ops change in AI, or like a growth leader change? Like, how do you think about that differently? Like, if the world's changing and the tech's changing, I think the skill set might change too. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but Roman, you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely think that the skill set needed will definitely change, and I think it really emphasizes it towards kind of a generalized marketer approach. I mean, these tools are really good at scaling an individual. They're good at processing information, and they're good at just making you be able to do more. And if you are skilled in all parts of the go-to-market motion, it really gives you a strong advantage. I mean, you need to have a deep understanding of the ops portion of it, the tech and the data aspect as well. But you need to have a pretty cohesive understanding of all parts of the funnel in order to make the best use of these tools. And if you know all these aspects, then you can really start getting creative with it and really scaling a ton of very personalized journeys, a ton of different touch points, and really emphasizing a buyer journey that's super contextual to the actual prospect that you're targeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. I think that's really helpful. Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, I think like
kind of engineering support too. So you're the lucky guy here. But
yeah, I'm the lucky guy here for sure. But I will say the shift is happening where non-technical users can be more effective now, right? And I think the biggest thing to call out, specifically with the growth marketing function in general, like how much it's grown and changed over time, is the traditional sort of marketer is not as attractive anymore to, say, like a scaled growth marketing organization. The reason being is that the gap between the people that hold the data, i.e. historically data engineering, data analysts, marketing ops, things like that, and the visibility that it gives to growth is slowly closing, right? And so if that gap is completely closed, where an average day growth marketer has access to all of the data and tools to action that data and do all those things, you're going to find that the impact is going to be much greater, because they're the ones that house all the business context and the strategy behind how to use that data. There's always been this constant thing between data engineering not having the business context, marketing and other folks, non-technical users, not having the context into the data. And that gap is shortening, and it will change things. And it's changing things much faster than I originally thought it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So it just like pre AI, like what was your technical team supporting you look like, Conrad? Like, I know you.
Pre-AI was. I mean, for us, we're pretty progressive. So pre-AI was like, hey, send this Marketo email to all these blanket audiences, and it's going to come from no reply at Rippling, and you're going to see awful performance. And then companies just keep doing it over and over instead of asking yourself, like, why am I actually doing this? Like, I can be way more effective with it. And so, in a new age world, obviously, there's significant expansion of headcount to leverage this technology, to push it, to scale it, to do all this stuff. And the non-technical user can be way more effective today than 5 years ago.
Yeah, cool. All right, real quick, I have one visual here, I think, to help folks out. We talked a lot about this central data store in the middle, typically a warehouse, and kind of what that stack looks like around it. And so this has traditionally been put together by tying a number of different tools together that are typically pretty technical and having engineers help you with this. But the flow in general is you have all these different data sources, like your CRM, your marketing automation platform, maybe intent provider, your product data, you name it. You have all these different data sources. We know there's been an explosion of go-to-market tools. But the general data flow is centralizing that data in a warehouse. This has typically been done through like an ETL tool. Once that's centralized, this is where you can start building your audiences. So like cutting different segments based on all those different attributes. How are they using the product? How have they interacted with marketing? Have they evaluated us in the past? Titles, location, you get the idea. And then it's activating those audiences in your systems of action. So whether that's whatever you do to send emails, ads, dialers, multi-channel type campaigns. But really, this is the source of truth that powers that flow. And really what CMAI is we've taken all the stuff around the warehouse and we've put it in a box so that you can implement it with one product and you don't need a bunch of engineers to do it. But either way, SEAM or not, like this is kind of how the best companies in the world are starting to programmatically outbound, generate pipeline, and apply AI. Because again, context is key with AI. So if you can centralize all of that in one place, your AI is going to have that much better of an output. So if that was helpful for folks. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty a little bit here. So first, there's a lot of different things in the funnel, right? You're following up with leads, you're doing outbound, you're running ads. Where do you think about applying AI first?
Yeah, Roman, you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so there are a lot of approaches here, and it all kind of depends on what is a priority for your organization. I mean, I would generally prefer a crawl to walk, run kind of approach, as you need to get comfortable with working with these tools and the types of output that you can expect from them. I mean, on our end, we started off at the top of the funnel by having it sort and process a lot of intent information, and then to give us account level summaries of what intent is happening at each account, what it means, and ranking these activities in a way that makes sense to our sales team. We then moved on to having it help speed up our existing campaign process. And so we started by having it help identify thematic content off of our website for specific campaigns, and to turn long form content into campaign assets like SDR emails, ads, and landing pages, and kind of that sort of thing. Once we felt comfortable with that, we then moved on to AI-generated outbound with sequences based on intent, and then to personalizing those sequences for each kind of persona and account that we are targeting. The key takeaway is that you need to have a good understanding of what you want to accomplish, and it's really important to have a process. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, I found that the best approach is is to start off by plugging AI into various manual parts of the process to speed things up, and then to figure out how to automate those processes with additional data flows or AI as a whole.
Great. So basically figure out who's showing intent and then summarize a bunch of content into form that could be used for outbound. And then actually activate that content with those folks showing intent. So that's like the 3 steps. Is that like a summary?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's important to naturally build on your work in increments and expand it as needed. I mean, I think a typical issue that people see is they try to have AI do everything all at once, and the results of that are underwhelming at best.
Totally. Conrad, I know that you've got a lot of automation and AI and programmatic stuff going on over there. Like, what parts of the funnel do you apply it?
Yeah, I'll give. There's a couple different parts of the business actually that we apply it. One is our support portal. A lot of our support portal today is run off of a 10-person AI company that has shown to be really effective at conversational sort of intelligence and navigating it, and then also with like ticket routing based on the context of the ticket to a human. And so we found a lot of success in the business unit there. I'll go back to the email one just because I think it's probably more relevant to the outbound and go-to-market functions, which is probably most of this audience. But we have about, like I talked about, that 250-person audience segmentation. Every night we have a ML model that runs to look at what is our available TAM to email. And we segment up to a certain volume every day of that audience. And the ML model looks at historical performance of that person and the sequence or the messaging that we're using for it. And what it does is it will dictate which part of the audience goes to what sequence based on that sort of conversion performance. And then we process that data, and it's sort of part of our significant automated marketing engine. We do the same thing for a program we called automated intent. Basically, if an account that comes to our website, we programmatically search data vendors to find the right personas under those accounts and then enroll them into sequences based on the various cuts of audience segmentation and things like that. And what we found is it has been super effective when it comes to the boost in performance and conversion that you get from it. And so, but I do think like the crawl, walk, run approach with AI is very, very critical. So really quickly, when we started to layer an AI on top of that ML model to figure out, okay, let's have them actually write the email instead of determining where to put the email, we decided to say, let's start with say 10% of our audience, and let's just have that fully written AI email. We'll monitor before it goes out the door, make sure it doesn't say anything like too crazy or inappropriate or anything like that. And we started with 10%, right? And then we measured performance, and it turns out it's like, oh, performance is actually pretty good. It's better than the baseline. Hey, let's up it to 20%. And we've sort of taken this programmatic approach to trying to see how well it will go. And we're currently in that phase of expanding it much greater and greater, which has shown some positive results.
Nice. So initially it was like routing people from your TAM to the right messaging that was pre-built. And then you're slowly replacing that message with like AI generated content as you validate that it's like working really well. Is that right?
Yeah, it's exactly right. Because if the old world, it doesn't, like, the messaging is going to relatively stay flat. You're not going to add more people to it, and all of a sudden that message is going to work 10x better. In order to make the message work 10x better, you not only need to write the person to the right content, but you need to send the right content. And that's the second phase of iteration we're in right now. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Folks, don't forget to throw questions in if you got them. If you don't, that's cool. Okay, let's talk about like the how to implement it. And like, this is where you can focus on, like, take one use case maybe, and we can talk about like, where does the data start? Where does it go? What kind of like tooling does it move through? I think that's like the stuff that folks are really hungry for. So who wants to start? Rowan, you want to kick us off here?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, so one of the first use cases that we had for AI was to help us create and maintain our intent model. And so to start off, our intent model included a ton of activity off of our website, some of our product usage, ad activity, and ad engagement, and as well as individual activity off of things like emails, events, and so forth. So initially, we used AI to do some basic data cleaning and analysis in order to determine which factors were the most impactful in terms of leading to a meeting or to an opportunity. We then used Seam to integrate a bunch of these data sources together on an account level, and then we fed that information into GPT-4 in order to give us summaries on each account that prioritized the activities they did, and then explained the meaning of those activities in a natural language format for our sales team. We then fed this information into Salesforce and made it easily accessible for our team to use on a weekly basis. We then connected his to an outbound platform like Salesloft and Smart Lead, and then we use that information to personalize a series of sequence emails based on that recent activity. And so we didn't start off by automating everything and taking our hands off the wheel. We had to augment an initial manual process and then worked on automating it internally. And at every step of that process, we had humans in order to check the input and the output. And as we got more comfortable with the results, we lessened that kind of manual intervention.
Got it. Okay, so summarize. First, we got all the data together. Then we essentially scored the contacts, right? Like what is showing the best intent based on historicals. That was identifying who to reach out to. Then used AI to like summarize the points that someone should use in an email. Humans were kind of checking and finalizing that email in like a Salesloft type tool. And then as you got more comfortable with it, you could automate more and more with that. So data together, score, identify, generate email, and send is like the end state there. Is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. And you're in like Salesloft. I know a lot of folks are talking about Smart Leads right now. So I think that's a tool that folks are really interested in. Awesome. Conrad, what about you? I know you got like a million use cases you could pull from, but like walk through one, maybe the SDR one or whatever.
Yeah. So I think like going back to centralizing the data into a single repository that has all of the right join keys, right? You match on domain to your account, you match on whatever it is, right? And you have this repository that is structured that you can leverage for all of these operational things in your business. Then like I think like one of the ones that we just did was we built our own predictive account scoring model, right? And so what we did is all the data was in the right place. We had all the signals, we had everything from email clicks to web visits to webinar attendees to, you name it, form fills, all that. Third-party review sites, third-party intent data, like all of those things. And now that we have it in one single unified place that is structured, which again took a lot of work previous to say AI helping to apply to it, we now can use it for all these things. And so the predictive account scoring model, we now have built a fit and intent score that's layered across all of our accounts in the business. And all of our sales reps books are turning to be a little bit more dynamic, where if an account becomes hot, we route it to an individual human to actually work the account. And that's where they can actually layer on the personalization that we help build for emails for them as well on that account. And so we try and create this like point in time conversion for our TAM. And that's just like one aspect of it. But all of that data being centralized, it's like audience building, the predictive account scoring, it's like the email stuff. It's like all of these critical go-to-market motions that you can accomplish that you historically have always done with single point solutions out of the box. that don't communicate together and don't work effectively together now can happen if all of the data foundation is layered correctly. So yeah, that's like a use case, but one of many that could be leveraged for this.
Yeah. It's kind of similar to Romans, is like, it's like first you all the data together, score, right? And it's like, now you can build scores relatively easily that are really specific to your business instead of like a black box score that you might buy, incorporating all those different signals. And then once you have that, I really like the kind of like rotating accounts in based on what's happening, because I know a lot of companies have like 10,000 accounts that aren't mapped to anybody, right? And like, you might like remap those once a year, but things are happening all the time. And so having a more dynamic book of business based on things that are happening real time in the market makes a lot of sense to me. I wonder if other companies are starting to do that more now.
Absolutely. We've seen a conversion impact for routing what we call these hot accounts, right? And applying a human to it. And we've seen it much better than like the cold outbound playbook, right? You'd expect it to be because they're researching or doing things related to your products or services. But I do think it's like the significant way of the future. I have to imagine that assigning books to your field once a year and having accounts sit is probably not the most optimal way.
Yeah, totally. It's like you can now like monitor all the accounts in your TAM, which is pretty exciting. Yeah. We got a couple questions that we can hit before we do this last one. Let's see. This was for Conrad, but Roman, feel free to chime in. Do you use a specific AI tool to write the emails for your outbound team, or is it something that you built in-house?
Yeah, we both. We started with some out-of-the-box third-party systems to see what it would iterate on. We're still evaluating some of them. We're doing it a little bit piecemeal. One example of one is, just because it sounds like you probably want some names, is we use Clay for a little bit of like personalizing the hook sentences and things like that. But most of the direction we're heading in now is we are going back to centralizing all of our data, and we're building internal LLMs to write the message. And we're training and feeding it templated, high-performing marketing templates of messaging and content to it to try and derive the best. And the results we've seen of that so far have been pretty effective. And we do think like, a lot of this stuff is, relatively cheap compared to, say, buying a UI-based product. And so I do think that's the direction we're going to head in, most likely, is worry about getting the right data, and then you can build something internally to write the right message.
Yeah, context is king. So if you give it good emails that have worked, it's like it's gonna be better output.
A lot of these companies, really quick, like they try and do both, right? They're trying to do, I want to write the email, but I also want to give you all the data. I'm a data enrichment vendor, right? And the path that we want to take is we want to become essentially the like data warehouse and the data storage, and then we can figure out how we actually, operationalize.
Yeah, great. Roman, anything to add there around like email writing?
Yeah, I mean, the marketplace in general is pretty saturated with these tools, and I think the worst kept secret is that most of them are just wrappers for GPT-4 with some additional backend prompts and maybe some training on their end. We kind of started off on that path as well, but what we ended up doing was essentially taking all of our best performing content and emails and just training a custom GPT model with OpenAI, and the results of that have been pretty good, and it's very much comparable to any other tool out there on the market.
Yeah,
I mean, that might change, but as it currently stands, I haven't seen a vendor that writes any particularly higher quality emails than that.
Yeah, cool. One more question for both of you. This is from Bruno. The AI market is constantly growing with various options available. How do you choose and decide to apply a good fit AI in your teams? How do you acquire AI? Like, how do you think about, vendor evals and picking the solution?
Yeah, I highly would recommend like POCs as you're going through evaluations. And luckily today, most of the SaaS businesses has come around to this concept that you can actually POC a software prior to purchasing it. That's what we've done a lot with is we'll pass it data to see what comes back first and foremost, and then vet whether it's quality or quantity sort of approach. But yeah, I would say like there is a lot of promises that these companies are making, but what I will say is like there's a pretty significant transformation happening. Whereas I talked about this actually on a previous webinar, which was that scaled companies are now trusting smaller AI companies to bring into their business. Whereas 10 years ago, nobody in a scaled B2B SaaS company was buying a 10-person software. It wasn't happening. Now today with AI, they're finding a lot more trust in these companies, and we have a whole bunch of them internally, right? So I do think it's like shifting the dynamics of what types of vendors and things are brought in. I think the days of sort of like ZoomInfo all-in-one for your field and go to market is like not a realistic expectation, and it's probably going to be a variety of softwares that help you.
Yeah. I think like the 10-person startup piece, it's like a testament to what building a startup looks like now, right? Like you can build a really robust, powerful product without 200 people to do it, right? Which is, I think, pretty exciting. Roman, any thoughts on like AI vendors?
Yeah, I mean, to add to Conrad's point, I mean, there is a huge shift in the market. I mean, recently we signed an AI-based contract with a vendor that has 8 employees, and it was a mid-5-figure deal. I mean, as Con had mentioned, I mean, like 10 years ago, that would have been impossible, and no CFO would have ever approved that. But I mean, on the AI tooling space, I mean, there are new tools emerging every single day. It is really hard to keep track of them. POCs are super important, but I do find that the current trend is that a bunch of these tools operate on a per credit system, and so it's very easy to test out new tools, do a small POC on your own, and just test it in the field. I mean, you don't have to take the vendor's word for it. You can just use their API to connect to your systems and see if it actually works in practice.
Yeah. I to that point, I think it's really easy to make an AI demo look really great when the demo data is like super clean and awesome. So like as an AI founder, I'd recommend for everyone who's evaluating AI to like try the tool in your environment. So I would guess whatever data that you want it to use is really siloed. It might be pretty messy if it's sales data. I don't know, a CRM that's like really, really clean. So I would encourage folks to say, okay, I want to see this in my environment, make sure that it can connect to all the data sources that you needed to connect to, and that the outputs are what you want. Because the devil's in the detail with this stuff. And we keep hammering this point, but data is context, and context is king for this AI stuff. Okay, we're basically at time. I think we're going to have to skip how do you measure and iterate. But Roman and I were talking about this before. It's like the same way that you do already, right? Like you need to be tracking what's working, what's not. If you don't have sort of those mechanisms in place now, get those first. I think we can wrap up. Any other final questions from the chat before we close? Don't think so.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Really thanks everybody. Hopefully this was helpful. We are going to put together a guide on how to start implementing AI in this motion. So stay tuned for that. And I'll send follow-ups to everyone who attended. And if you want it, just let me know. So thanks everyone.
Thank you guys.